Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cyberstorage and XDR, Threat Detection Through a Storage Lens. This is brought to you by the SNIA Cloud Storage Technology Initiative. This is Michael Hord. I'm your host and facilitator for today's discussion. I work for Intel, and I serve as chair for the SNIA Cloud Storage Technology Initiative. Today's conversation is with Erin Farr, who works for the Storage CTO office at IBM, and she is vice chair for the SNIA CSTI. Hello, Erin. How are you?
I'm good, Michael. Thank you. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you. Before we get started, I want to mention that SNIA is a group of about 180 industry-leading organizations comprising of 2,500 active contributing members and 50,000 participating IT end users and storage experts worldwide. As one of the organizations within SNIA, the CSTI is dedicated to education and promotion of cloud storage technologies like AI at the edge, storage security, as well as driving understanding and collaboration among other industry associations. Before we get started, let's take a quick look at the SNIA legal notice. This provides SNIA's copyright notice regarding use of the material. There are no warranties expressed or implied, so if you want to reference this material, please do so at your own risk. You can download a copy of this presentation using the interface for the live webinar. The interface also allows you to submit questions during the talk and rate this presentation at the conclusion. We really appreciate your questions and feedback. For today's discussion, Erin will describe industry trends driving threat detection in storage, along with challenges facing security and infrastructure teams, as well as key characteristics on detection, response methods, and alternatives. We encourage you in the audience to submit questions at any time during the presentation. If we are not able to cover all the questions during the session, we'll answer your questions in a Q&A blog, which will be posted after this webinar. So let's get started. Erin, please take it away.
Thank you, Michael. So first, I'd like to talk about the industry trends that are driving storage vendors to put threat detection into their solutions. For large enterprises, the amount of unstructured data is projected to triple between 2020 and 2024, according to Gartner. This includes data on premises, in the cloud, and on the edge, and that data needs protected. Enter cyberstorage, a term coined by Gartner that is about putting threat detection and response capabilities into storage software and hardware. Now, solutions can be pure software or a dedicated appliance, which is easier to add on, but Gartner asserts it offers less protection than something fully integrated with the data storage solution, and that's presumably due to response times. Though Gartner also acknowledges not everyone can just swap out their storage vendor. But keep in mind, pure software solutions can often be fast enough to help reduce the blast radius. But there are also other factors to consider beyond the deployment model, which we'll discuss. So where does cyberstorage fit when you look at your overall end-to-end security? So let's look at that within the context of the NIST cybersecurity framework, also called NIST CSF. If you're not familiar with it, this is a voluntary framework that consists of standards, guidelines, and best practices to manage your cybersecurity risk. And this framework core consists of 5 concurrent and continuous functions: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And just for those who aren't familiar, right, identify is about knowing what you have and includes activities like getting an inventory of your assets and understanding the resources that support critical functions. Protect is about prevention. It's about putting measures in place to ensure delivery of critical services. These are things like multi-factor authentication or even encrypting data at rest. And this is not the focus of cyberstorage. Now, detect is about discovering that a cybersecurity event is occurring. while respond is about the actions that are taken once an incident is detected, like containment and root cause analysis. And note that this can involve human processes or automated response through software. Now, recover is probably what this audience is most involved in. This is about having plans for resilience and restoring any capabilities and data after a cybersecurity incident. So keep in mind, Cyberstorage plays mainly in the detection and response phases. Now, there is a piece that benefits recovery, where Cyberstorage helps pinpoint when an attack started. That can help determine which data to recover. But the main focus for today is to dive deeper on detection and response. So the goal of Cyberstorage is to reduce the blast radius as much as possible in cases where an incident was not prevented, to detect it quickly, to detect it accurately, and to respond faster. So there's a parallel trend happening on the security side that is driving putting more threat detection into various domains like storage. So your security monitoring tooling is generally known as SIEM, or Security Information and Event Management. And what it does is it ingests, normalizes, and correlates log and network flow data in order to spot malicious activity in real time. Now, this includes activity from devices, from servers, from network, from data and applications, even from configurations, and also vulnerability information and threat intelligence. So you may have noticed I mentioned data, right? So why do we need Cyberstorage if this detection already exists? Well, for example, some SIEMs have capabilities to look at data accesses for exfiltration detection, which is like when a bad actor siphons data off your system. But you know what happens? People don't turn it on. And this is because there's too much data getting sent to the SIEM to do that analysis. I mean, a large organization can collect 2 billion events per day. So imagine if they're all now collecting information on every single file access, right? So for those events they do collect, those get correlated down to some number of incidents that need manual investigation. Now, many will be false positives and not need a full response. So SIEMs use data that's high volume. There's a ton of data being flown into your SIEM and low accuracy. So there became a need for better alert quality and a more automated response. So that led in part to extended detection and response, or XDR. So the DR refers to detection and response, right? And the X means any data source for like a cross-layer detection. So XDR is about getting higher fidelity alerts instead of pushing up all the log data. And then to get those higher fidelity alerts, well, what do you likely need to do? You need to move some of the analytics, which are currently centralized, down into each domain, such as your network and your endpoints, and in our case, storage, which enables a more automated and decentralized response at the point of interaction. So this is effectively driving the same trends as Cyberstorage, which is putting, threat detection and response into storage. So just keep in mind, XDR does not replace SIEM, right? Think of XDR as a layer above a number of security tools to specifically focus on the use case of threat detection and response. It incorporates your SIEM, your response tooling, commonly called SOAR, and collects these higher fidelity alerts from each of the domains, like networks and storage. So in this evolution to XDR, where can storage help, right? So first we had endpoint detection and response, or EDR. And this is the threat detection software that runs on your laptops, for example, or on IT assets like servers. Then along came network detection and response, or NDR. So what NDR can do is it can detect how a bad actor may be moving through your network. It can tell you what is the bad actor doing. And then along came XDR, which expanded to other domains beyond endpoints and networks like operational technology and cloud. So why not the storage domain? I mean, this could tell you what data is the bad actor touching. Now, there are some in the security industry who say or might say that storage doesn't have enough context, like user and process info, to accurately detect threats. But keep in mind, folks tend to think about storage only as hardware, right? But software-defined storage is running on your live systems, right? However, Storage-based detection won't ever replace an EDR or SIEM and XDR, but there are patterns that storage can detect that can complement existing detection mechanisms or give the SIEM or XDR more robust and higher fidelity alerts. So now I'll talk about some of the challenges faced by security and infrastructure teams given these industry trends, right? So both security and infrastructure teams, and note that storage is part of infrastructure here, are needed for data security and responding to attacks, but silos exist. If we look at both cybersecurity and cyber resilience, cybersecurity is first and foremost about prevention, about keeping the bad actors out of your environment. It's also about quickly detecting and responding to an incident to reduce the impact. And these types of responsibilities usually fall under the CISO, your Chief Information Security Officer. Now, cyber resilience is about an organization's ability to recover. And this is usually owned by infrastructure teams like storage. So if you look at the phases of NIST CSF, detect is typically the sole responsibility of the CISO. And response is often handled by both security and infrastructure teams, each doing different pieces before recovery even starts. So if threat detection and automated response is now being added to storage, who's now responsible for acting on that, right? I mean, nobody expects storage admins to become incident responders, though storage admins or perhaps storage software can maybe help take swift actions to reduce the blast radius of an attack. So holistic data security requires seamless operation and coordination across both teams. But first, we don't always even speak the same language, right? The term data protection itself has different definitions depending on who you talk to. If you're talking to a CISO, data protection means either data privacy, which is proper handling of sensitive data, or data security, which is about protecting data from bad actors. Now, if you're talking to storage folks, data protection means safeguarding data from corruption with backups and providing that ability to recover. However, as storage capabilities advance to the left, right, into data security, the lines are becoming blurred. Like we already have capabilities like encrypting data at rest, and now threat detection is being added into. And so this industry trend of cyber storage, doing detection and response at the storage layer, is driving the need for some kind of coordination with security tooling and security teams. So we have a couple of poll questions for you today. And here's the first of two. So who should be responsible for detecting threats surfaced by storage? And you can look at the bottom of your screen to see where to vote. And your choices includes, the storage admin, the security analyst who would be doing, say, incident response, both, or perhaps somebody else. And we'll keep this open for about 20 or so seconds. And if anybody's having trouble finding the poll, feel free to put a question in the chat. It should be down at the bottom of your screen. Oh. And so it looks like we have about 65% of folks think it should be both the storage admin and the security analyst. Oh, we still have some poll coming in? I thought the poll ended. All right, the numbers changed on me a little bit, and they're still changing a little bit. So right now we have 62% say both, 20% say the security analyst, and 16% say the storage admin. All right, so now I'm going to talk about some of the silos that maybe exist within storage. So here on the left, we have a live production system with an application that's writing out data to some primary storage volumes. And if you have storage that supports immutable snapshots, you may be taking those snapshots at various intervals throughout the day as recovery points. And then if you have and then eventually, if you're backing up your data to some form of secondary storage, right? So we're in a situation today where businesses take either primary snapshots and secondary backups, but those often have different teams and are using different tooling, or perhaps you just take secondary backups only, but that can lengthen your time to recovery when compared to using primary snapshots. And of course, nobody does primary snapshots only, as that'd be way too expensive. So data protection is either siloed or data is maybe not as readily available, which can slow recovery. And why does this matter? Well, if we look at this in the context of the threat detection landscape today, you have your CISO on the upper right, who is charged with security across the enterprise. And they work with security teams, such as a security analyst, to monitor for threats. And typically this is through their SIEM, but with storage building more and more anomaly detection into their hardware and software, the security analyst also needs to be able to react to those alerts coming through. But today, if an analyst has to gather more information, the traditional data protection environment tends to be siloed. So here we have, again, the different teams for primary and secondary storage. And even within primary storage, you may have different tooling for the different types of storage. And if storage admins don't have a holistic view, an incident responder in CISO will now also not have that holistic view. And that can lengthen the time to respond if further drill down is needed. And then add to that the fact that storage software doesn't tend to cater to the security persona. These factors can inhibit a timely response. And so now we have our last poll question for today. Are you concerned about silos across primary and secondary storage? And you can look at the bottom of your screen to see where to vote. And you can see that the answers are yes, because we have different tools and different teams. Or no, we use different tools, but we're under one team. And no, we have one tool and one team managing it all. And we'll keep this open for about 20 seconds to give folks a chance to respond. Okay, so now I do think the poll has ended, and we had 55% of folks saying, yes, I'm concerned. We have different tools and different teams, which now also just bumped to 63%. I thought I gave it enough time to settle, but so it's at 63% for people who are concerned. 9% says no, we use different tools, but are under one team, and 27% says they have one tool and one team managing it all. So great. So moving on to continue with our discussion of challenges, when you look at the attack landscape today, and how long does it take for a ransomware attack to encrypt your files? It's usually less than a day once activated, and often just hours or minutes. And you can see I have some statistics here from CISA, and also there was some research done by Splunk to show various times for different amounts of files. But for business critical workloads, I assert that some level of primary storage is needed for faster recovery, but that cost requires that some data be kept on secondary storage. So here we are again in the situation where we potentially have silos. So next, I'll talk about what specific threat detection methods are used in the security industry today, just to give some background so that we can then talk about which of those make sense at the storage layer. And I'll do this by using an analogy. So let's say you live in a suburban neighborhood and there have been instances of mailboxes getting damaged. In fact, once they even caught the perpetrator red-handed, or in this case, red-pawed, because it was Garfield the cat. Now, maybe he was hangry from not getting his lasagna, but everyone knows if you see Garfield walking down the street with a bat, you know to keep him away from your mailbox. So Garfield in this case is a known threat. You know specifically who to look for. And this is similar to how antivirus scanners work today. They have signatures of known malware and basically look for those signatures. So obviously, this doesn't work for unknown threats. So let's say you see a kid walking down the street with a bat. Are they a threat to your mailbox? Since you see him walk by every Saturday with his baseball uniform on, you realize, oh, well, he just has games on Saturdays. However, what if you were to see the same kid with a bat, but no uniform, and on a Tuesday night? Then maybe you want to pay closer attention to him. And this is because he demonstrated a behavior outside what you've seen as normal. And this is similar to what endpoint detection and response software does. It usually uses some form of machine learning or statistical methods or even heuristics to look for behaviors outside what's normal. Now, how this might map to an enterprise, if a storage admin doesn't normally log in at midnight on a Friday, then you know something is maybe up. Maybe their account was compromised. So note that EDR tooling usually also includes some form of signature scanning as well, right? But in addition to looking for unusual behaviors of people, we can also look for unusual behaviors in the environment. So for example, maybe you heard weather reports of a hailstorm coming, or you can hear it arriving as it starts to pelt everything in your neighborhood. Now you don't know if it's going to damage your mailbox. Maybe the hail won't hit it, or it won't be big enough to do damage, but you have advanced warning. So while other mailboxes may have been impacted, you may be able to protect yours and others in the neighborhood. So this is analogous to looking at patterns in your environment to determine if something unusual is happening. So for storage solutions, this is what you'll see more than the other two detection mechanisms I mentioned. And finally, let's say you wake up one morning and you see, your mailbox was damaged, but you're not sure how it happened. But you know enough, though, to warn your neighbors that Garfield or someone else may be at it again, and you know that you now need to repair your mailbox. And this is analogous to looking for evidence of malware by looking for data destruction. And if this is detected early enough, it could help reduce the blast radius of an attack, and it can help you determine the scope of an attack. So storage tends to use the two methods on the right-hand side. And keep in mind that storage-based detection typically isn't explicitly looking for specific malware. Instead, it's looking for evidence or signs of malware. So now I want to take a deeper dive on the typical storage detection methods, but looking at them across the entire data lifecycle, right? So here again, I show our live production system and the corresponding data lifecycle. So an EDR or a SIEM and XDR already today detect threats against your live system, right? However, there is detection storage can do to either complement the existing algorithms used in EDR. For example, we can add logic specific to analyzing file metadata patterns, or we can make detection more efficient by doing it at the storage layer and sending higher fidelity alerts up to XDR. So additionally, if data is copied into a snapshot, that snapshot can be further analyzed outside the production workloads. And solutions exist today that do this and look for evidence of data corruption. And finally, as data moves to secondary storage or backups, there are solutions today that analyze backup metadata for anomalous behavior, for example, by looking at compression and dedupe rates. Now, keep in mind, this is primarily to detect attacks against the primary storage itself, not the backup data. So when considering these, you'll want to keep the frequency of backups in mind. If the average ransomware attack impacts all of your data in only a few hours, but you back up every 24 hours, effective detection would rely on timing of when the attack started. Now, that said, defense in depth is generally always a good idea. So in general, there are different approaches that can be taken across different stages of the data lifecycle for defense in depth. So now I'll talk about the key characteristics needed if you are assessing a solution which has threat detection and response in storage. So let's take those detection and response methods and view them under a storage lens and see which can provide value. And so let's start with signature-based scanning. This is that Garfield scenario, right? Now, this scanning is already part of EDR and is looking for specific malware variants. So duplicating that approach also in storage would be redundant and would probably not add value, at least not for detection, but it can add value for recovery flows. So keep that in mind, right? But we're focused on detection and response today. So now let's look at anomaly detection. Machine learning or even heuristic-based approaches may complement EDR and add value, depending on the data and algorithms used. But you'll want to ensure the false positive rate is low, though. So storage level threat detection is uniquely positioned to look for evidence of data destruction, especially if it's performed outside the production workloads and if it is fast enough. So snapshots are well suited for this approach since they provide fast access to data, but the length of time for analysis of the snapshot and the frequency with which the snapshots are taken should be considered to know if it's going to be fast enough, right? Also, exfiltration detection, again, where someone siphons data off your system, doing this at the storage layer can reduce the large amounts of data that would otherwise be sent to a SIEM. And keep in mind, exfiltration attacks often precede ransomware attacks. So sending a higher fidelity alert to XDR could provide value. And then for any detection being performed at the storage layer, integration with SIEM and XDR is a must-have, since security analysts need a holistic view. They can't be off looking at another separate monitoring tool. And also storage, it really doesn't always have all the context needed to determine if an attack is occurring. So storage anomalies here may be part of a larger story, paint a better picture of what's going on in the system. And so for those cases, a centralized analysis makes sense. And then finally, for automated response, such as halting malware or restricting access to data, one should gain confidence in the detection software to ensure minimum false positive rates before automatically cutting off access to data. Perhaps look for a warning mode feature and run with that first. And so the items in this box, in my opinion, have the highest value for detection and response, right? Now, detection of data destruction can provide value if the time it takes to analyze a snapshot and the frequency of snapshots are considered. So I wouldn't rule it outright. But the items outside these square, right, the detecting data destruction and the signature scanning, they provide a ton of value for recovery flows. So don't rule these methods out completely if you see them in a product. Just specific to threat detection, it's perhaps less value than the other methods, but on recovery flows, they can provide high value. So just look at them in the context in which they'll be used. So in summary, here's what to look for if you are considering buying storage that has some level of threat detection built in. A solution must be integrated with your SIEM or XDR. Whoops, I don't know how that happened. Ideally, try to ensure the information that's surfaced is sufficient to take an action without further drill down, if possible. And then keep in mind that storage solutions that only do detection against secondary storage, only on your backups, that might not be timely enough for detecting attacks like ransomware, for example, if the backups only occur every 24 hours. And then for storage solutions that offer automated response, try to understand the false positive rates before enabling it. Run into a warning mode first if that's available. So hopefully this information can arm you with the criteria to consider and which questions to ask if your business is buying new storage with built-in threat detection capabilities. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Michael, and then we can see if there are any questions.
Okay, great. Here, I'll adjust my audio. We have two questions. So Aaron, there's a question here. You mentioned antivirus scanning is redundant for threat detection and storage, but could this provide some value during recovery? Yes.
So I mentioned it can have a high value during recovery because, and it's not always intuitive why this is the case, right? So, if malware makes it to your snapshots or your backups, if it ever made it there, it's because it was unknown, that it was not detected, right? So then at some point, if that malware gets activated, and your files get encrypted, suddenly now we know something happened. We know there was malware, the incident responders come in, the signature is now identified, it becomes known, we know it's Garfield, whatever, and they quickly add a patch to their signature scanning software. And so what you want to make sure you happen, since malware can dwell on your systems without being activated for days or weeks, you want to use that updated signature scan to validate that you're not reintroducing malware that was laying dormant for days or weeks before having been activated. But obviously you need that flow of the quick patch turnaround time or the quick signature scanning. And that way you can ensure, even though you're bringing things back from backup, you're not, reconstituting some malware.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Sounds great. And then another question, what are other possible factors to consider when addressing cyber storage solutions?
Sure. So, folks generally tend to look at CPU usage for any solution. And looking at that for threat detection capabilities makes sense, but you might want to look at it in the context of where the threat detection is occurring across that data lifecycle. For example, if it's on your live system, you'll want lower CPU usage. But if the detection is occurring against a snapshot outside your production workloads, or if it's against secondary storage, higher CPU usage may not matter as much.
Okay, sounds great. Well, that's all the questions we have, and so I want to thank you very much, Aaron, for your expertise and insights. This has been a fantastic discussion with a lot of excellent information, and I really appreciate all your time and effort that you put on this. And thank you to our audience. Thank you for joining us. Please remember to rate this webinar, as this is very important to get your feedback, which helps us create better educational material. Also, please remember you can always download presentation material and many other items at our educational library, as well as following us on Twitter. Thanks again to all, and have a great day. Thank you.